6 people have died from a rare condition called thunderstorm asthma in Australia, and 5 more people remain on life support in Melbourne. Thousands of people sought treatment for asthma attacks after a thunderstorm caused rain-soaked pollen grains to explode all over the city. According to the Associated Press, around a third of those patients had never suffered from asthma before. The state of Victoria health minister said the demand for ambulances were so high that it was like having 150 bombs going off right across Melbourne. This is not the first time a thunderstorm has caused an explosion of asthma cases across the city. The last major event in Melbourne was in November of 2010.
It rises 627 feet above downtown San Francisco, a posh condo building described as the pinnacle of luxury real estate. But the problem is, it towers considerably less than when it was first built. Millennium Tower is sinking and tilting, and its residents are worried. It sits in the middle of an earthquake zone, so what will happen in an earthquake? The 58-story building, completed in 2009, has sunk 16 inches. All major buildings are expected to settle somewhat, but that's way more than the 4 to 6 inches a building that size should settle over its lifetime. It's also tilting 7.6 inches to the northwest. Satellite images from the European Space Agency show it's sinking a few centimeters every year. More than a dozen residents are suing, saying the developer should have disclosed the problems long ago. The developer blames the sinking on removal of groundwater during construction of a transit building next door, but insists the building is safe. The question is, who's right? And when we find out, will it be too late? I'm Danielle Banks, the Weather Channel. Now we go to Guatemala, where the Volcano de Fuego, meaning volcano of fire, you can definitely see where it gets that name from. The time-lapse video taken at night shows the lava just fountaining down the sides. There was ash spewing into the air. The volcano, again nicknamed Fuego, is famous for being almost constantly active and at a very low level. A lot of weather news from around the world recently. We'll begin in Italy, where 2 people died in flash flooding. Look at all of that water. People have been ordered to evacuate in advance of the storms that brought all of this rainfall in several cities in northwestern Italy. There have been hundreds of people, as you can imagine, that have been left homeless. Look at the roads completely destroyed, and some of these intense rains, as you can see, triggered landslides. And the famous Sicilian orange crop, unfortunately, has also sustained a lot of damage within that same region. Just terrible. There was also deadly flooding in Greece, which prompted evacuations and ended up claiming the life of 1 man on the island of Zakynthos, Greece. Several people were rescued from flooded basements there. And then check out this, a massive water spout just north of Valencia, Spain, which is a huge tourist area. Some are referring to it as the sea tornado. Tourists and locals were watching in relief as that huge water spout thankfully stayed offshore.
Cases of H5N8 bird flu have been detected in wild ducks in northern France amid a recent outbreak of the disease in Europe. France, Europe's largest poultry producer, is still recovering from a severe epidemic which led to a total halting of duck and goose production in the southwest of the country in January. We've seen that there have been cases of wild birds contaminating domestic poultry, said Loïc Evin of the French Agriculture Ministry. It's a risk that we clearly can't rule out. That's why it's very important all the farmers' protection measures are taken to avoid the transfer of the virus from the wild to our livestock. Outbreaks in neighbouring countries, including the Netherlands, Switzerland and Germany, prompted the ministry to impose additional precautions at farms and restrict hunting and bird gathering earlier this month.
President Erdogan has warned that Turkey could open its borders, enabling migrants to flow into the European Union.
When 50,000 refugees turned up at the border gate, you said, "What will we do when Turkey opens the border gates?" Look, if you go further, those border gates will be opened. You should know that.
That statement came after the European Parliament MEPs voted in favour of a temporary halt to EU membership talks with Turkey. A freeze in the more than 10-year-old talks was initiated following, quote, the disproportionate and repressive measures taken by Ankara after July's failed coup. Now, relations between the EU and Ankara have recently soured over a number of issues. They include the reluctance of the EU to grant visa-free travel, European concerns over human rights in Turkey, and Ankara's threats to jeopardize the migrant deal. However, at the start, relations between the two sides looked like they had a pretty rosy future.
While Turkey is under attack from terrorism directly and indirectly from all corners of the country and by all the terror organisations and their sponsors, the EU is telling us to change our counter-terror law in exchange for visas.
If President Erdogan decides to deny the Turks the right to free travel to Europe, then he must explain this to the Turkish people. It will not be my problem, it will be his problem.
The death penalty can be discussed by the relevant institutions according to the Constitution, and a decision may be taken.
Horst Wenzel, dubbed Germany's #1 love expert, has been volunteering his services to teach new migrants how to flirt and approach women. The 27-year-old, who makes his living teaching wealthy but shy German men, has recently decided to offer his advice to young Syrian and Iraqi refugees in Dortmund, most of them from war-torn Muslim countries. Some German women are a bit racist towards us, said this Syrian refugee. They don't know how refugees think or how they are living. Some people are getting the wrong idea. The way of living in the Middle East is different than the way people live here in Europe. Religion and manners are different. We don't enjoy all the freedoms that you have here in Germany. While a part of the population is said to be against this project, as it is conducted in a country where Europe's migrant influx is already having deep political and social consequences, some German women seem receptive to the idea. Human touch, honesty, trust, that's what matters, insisted this local resident. Then I don't care whether he's from Syria or not. I'm a free woman. I don't want to be restricted, but otherwise, yes, if he's open-minded, it can work. According to reports, last year alone, around 890,000 people applied for asylum, with hundreds of thousands more applying this year.
Right people in Russia, and he knew that I would get them to tell him the truth. And we all feel, Dana and I feel, that Russia and America have never fought each other in a war. We believe that Russia and America should be best friends. And we believe that many of the people in America love Vladimir Putin. We believe that many of the people in America love Russia. We believe that many of the people in America are not going along with the hocus pocus of certain governmental bodies who want to try to perpetuate the Cold War. We believe that the Cold War is a fantasy and a hoax to perpetuate maybe some sort of financial gain here and there for certain individuals. And we think that the only way to really create world balance and world power and peace in the world is if America and Russia become brothers and best friends. And that's my mission in life, is to get better relationships between Russia and America and keep them good.
Now, you mentioned that you have quite a few powerful friends in Russia, and you also mentioned Vladimir Putin's name already. It's not a secret that you know each other personally. How well do you know each other?
Gosh, I want to be polite and say that I probably don't know him very well. I would like to think that I know him well, but Suffice it to say that I know him well enough to know that he is one of the greatest world leaders, if not the greatest world leader alive today. He cares more about Russia than anybody I know, and he's not afraid to stand up and do what needs to get done.
Hundreds of thousands of Deutsche Telekom customers in Germany had their broadband service cut off on Sunday following a hack attack on its hardware. At one point, as many as 900,000 people suffered internet outages. That number fell to 400,000 as security measures were implemented. The head of the company's IT security said the incident appeared to be tied to a botched attempt to infect customers' routers with a new version of Mirai, which is a malicious software. The attempt failed. The company, which has 20 million customers in Germany, has issued a software update and is asking affected customers to disconnect their routers.
The assault was sudden and violent, and within moments, the campus of Ohio State University with 60,000 students was locked down. 11 people were hurt when a student from Somalia attacked with a car and then a knife in what is being investigated as an act of terror. A police officer shot and killed the suspect. Dean Reynolds has the latest, and he's in Columbus.
Additional units in the area of 19th and College. We have several pedestrians struck by a vehicle.
The time on the Ohio State campus was 9:52 a.m., and a clutch of students and teachers had assembled outside because a building fire alarm had sounded. They were easy targets for a man who drove his Honda Civic onto the sidewalk and into them, then got out and slashed as many onlookers as he could with a butcher knife.
Yeah, I need medics at the McQuigg lab as soon as possible. All patients are alert and oriented, but severe bleeding out of some of them.
The attacker was identified as a student at OSU, Somali-born Abdul Razak Ali Artan. Joseph Knoll, a junior at OSU, was on the street a few feet away.
And I heard a bunch of screaming, so I took my headphones out, and all these people were rushing over this way. At first, I thought it was some sort of game or something, until I could see everyone's faces. And
what
I knew
their faces looked like.
They were terrified.
Campus police were already at the scene investigating a gas leak that triggered that fire alarm, and Officer Alan Haruchko took action.
Chief, we got one down, critical down here. The shooter's in custody.
Ohio State University's chief of police is Craig Stone.
Our officers was on scene in less than a minute, and he ended the situation less than a minute. He engaged the suspect, and he eliminated the threat. The suspect is DOA.
As the events unfolded, the university sent out alerts to students in unmistakable terms. Run, hide, fight. Key instructions used in campus-wide training to indicate an active threat. The response was immediate, as students barricaded themselves in classrooms while waiting about 2 hours for the all clear.
11 people, including students and faculty, were hurt, and one of them is in critical condition tonight. Some were injured in the car crash, Nora, while others suffered lacerations in the knife attack.
All right, Dean Reynolds, thank you so much.
The Israeli military says it struck an ISIL target on the Syrian side of the Golan Heights. It comes a day after an Israeli airstrike reportedly killed 4 gunmen from the jihadist group following a clash near the border. ISIL militants are said to have fired mortars and shot at local forces patrolling in the Golan Heights in what would be the first such attack by the group in the disputed region. No Israeli forces were injured. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, "We are well prepared. We will not allow any faction to establish a presence near our borders under the cover of the war in Syria." Those killed are thought to have belonged to the Yarmouk Martyrs Brigades, a Syrian group that recently swore allegiance to the self-proclaimed Islamic State.